welcome to Movies, Films, and Flicks. I am Mark Hoffmeyer, and joining me is a man who is about to be very angry. It's Tom Tresimer.
I'm already starting to get angry. I can just feel it. I can feel it coming.
Whenever there's a list out, you don't even read it, and you're angry that it's not what you wanted.
I don't even look at the title of your list, and it's just the movies. If the movies that I personally don't like aren't in that list, I'm probably not going to like it.
Yeah, I did a list once about the best 1970s action films, and you got incredibly angry. And you were like, why is The Dark Knight not in here? And I was like, well, Dark Knight was made in 2000, was released in 2008. And you're like, yeah, well, it's a throwback.
It doesn't matter.
And then you're like, Winter Soldier should be in here too, because it's like a 1970s political thriller.
It should have been.
Yeah.
There's elements of the 70s in there.
Exactly.
It should have been in there.
So yeah, you get hyped.
I do. I get triggered pretty quick.
You're actually a very mellow guy. As you know, you listen to the podcast Hackers, you'll listen to Real Genius, other episodes. You're chill. But when it comes to the lists, you get pretty hyped, don't you?
I get triggered quick over lists. Especially if I don't read the title and I feel like an idiot afterwards. I get even more angry.
That was a good one on your part. That made me so happy. That made my day. But yeah, if you go on Movies, Films, and Flicks Facebook, you'll see Tom all over the comments here.
Trying to sway people's opinions.
So I brought Tom in for this. We're getting away from Hackers. So you and I did Live Free or Die Hard. Then we did Hackers. Then we did Real Genius. We had the Hacker trilogy.
We did.
We're not doing that. So now we're kind of talking about the tiers of 1990s action movies. And this all came from a tournament that I put on Movies, Films, and Flicks Facebook. So basically I pitted Hard Boiled, Time Cop, True Lies, Desperado, Face Off, Rumble in the Bronx, Point Break, The Long Kiss Goodnight, Die Hard 3, Under Siege, GoldenEye, Con Air, The Rock, Demolition Man, Speed, and Bad Boys against each other. I purposely left out movies like The Matrix. This is basically early 90s, like not past 96. I left out The Matrix. I left out T2 because I had done tournaments in the past where it's just a runaway.
Yeah, like those will just crush everything.
And it's fun, but then you get to that and it's just a blowout. And so I wanted to do movies that were closer to each other. And you got pretty hyped on this one when we were going through it because the final, which legit blew my mind, and it got a ton of votes though. Did you see the amount of votes that this tournament got? A ton.
It got a lot of votes, and especially per round.
The final matchup, some were 50, like some were 48, 52. Like these are really close, almost all of them. I don't know why. But the finals was True Lies versus Demolition Man. Now, Demolition Man had to beat The Rock, right? Then it had to beat Speed. Then it had to beat Die Hard 3. It beat 3 top-tier action films of the 90s. And it went up against True Lies. True Lies beat Desperado, which kind of broke my heart. Then it beat Time Cop, which was a blowout.
No surprise.
That was the biggest blowout.
That was a big one.
And then it faced off against... Let me think. I think it went off, faced off against Point Break, which, man.
In the semis. That's a tough one.
That's tough. And that's a good semi matchup.
That is a good semi matchup. That could even be a finals matchup, depending on how the bracket was built.
The thing that really bummed me out is Hard Boiled lost to Time Cop. Hard Boiled, you can't talk about 1990s action films, the best, without bringing up Hard Boiled. And Time Cop beat it. But I think it's just the love of JCVD.
And especially early mid-90s JCVD. I mean, he was arguably one of the biggest stars at that point in his career.
And I would say...
world, and that was a tough matchup.
Outside of action junkies, not many people know of Hard Boiled.
No.
Time Cop was a $100 million success. I bought a ticket for it when I was 12. The guy was just smiled at me and sold me a ticket. It was like one of the greatest days of my life. But this movie, I think why we got so many votes, right? Die Hard 3, I went and saw in 6th grade with a buddy. I mean, a lot of these movies, like I remember Quentin Tarantino talking about Rumble in the Bronx, and that's how I got massively into Jackie Chan. So Bad Boys, dude, I quoted Bad Boys for life. It's some Bobalicious. So this movie, but Demolition Man though, beat The Rock in Speed. And you were pissed.
Demolition Man is like, what was the old... It's like somebody busting your bracket in the NCAAs. That's what Demolition Man is. That's like the number 32 seed making a run. Mm-hmm. Like, it should not have happened, but it did. And I think it's we briefly discussed it, but it's just the nostalgia and the love behind it.
Yeah.
And I went back and watched it after this tournament, and it drove me crazy.
One line, though, I texted you this. One line was ahead of its time when Sandra Bullock... So these guys are kind of broing out to each other, and Benjamin Bratt asks her, like, why do they talk to each other like that? And Sandra Bullock's like, it's what insecure men used to do back in the day. And that's such a funny line. That's a good line. And I think Wesley Snipes, right? He chews the scenery. He loves every second being in this movie. And Stallone is loose in it as well.
Stallone is very loose in it. I think what gets me with Snipes is that I feel like they just didn't rein him in at all. So they almost just let him do whatever he wanted. And there was parts of times, and again, this is what it was made in 93. Yeah. So it's 26 years later.
Height of their power.
Watching this.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's definitely not my favorite action movie.
It shouldn't have gotten past
The Rock.
I would have liked to have seen, I get why Speed would beat Bad Boys, but imagine The Rock versus Speed. Speed would win.
I think Speed probably would have won, but I don't, of the 8 times that we voted there in the opening round, I don't know if I would have been able to vote for that one. I may just not have just skipped that round.
I had people messaging me, and they're like, I can't vote. I'm like, what? I can't do it. John Levengood, who has been on, a lot of Movies, Films, and Flicks episodes, he several times, he said, why are you doing this to me? Someone else going, this is terrible. Like, they couldn't vote.
Sometimes in life you're faced with difficult decisions, and you put a lot of them out there in this tournament.
Yeah, and that's why I did it. So I sat around with my wife Megan, and we just talked about. I didn't want any blowouts. Even the final wasn't really a blowout. Like Demolition Man lost 48 to 52%.
Yeah.
I just think it's interesting that's why I devised it. But then you and I got talking further about 90s action movies, and a lot of people say that the 90s were the greatest decade for action films.
I agree with that.
And if someone made that argument, you can't really argue with them, because I think it's stronger than the 2000s. I think this decade we've had, so my favorite action films have come out this decade. The history of action films, The Raid 1 and 2 are my favorite. They're my tops. And I mean, we also had Mad Max Fury Road this year, the John Wick movies.
Yep.
I just think the variety in the 90s was insane. I mean, we had Hong Kong cinema. We had just cinema all over the world exploding.
I think part of that, too, on a technical level, is the turning of the quality of special effects and VFX that were going into the movies.
Yeah.
It's like the late 80s, early 90s, especially with James Cameron, was like right when like the CGI actually started taking hold.
And then Total Recall hit.
And they were able to do things that they wanted to actually do that they couldn't make previously. Like, they just didn't have the technical capabilities to do it. And so, the special effects, the VFX, even like the sound editing just got better and better and better as that decade went on.
Yeah, and you can really see in my list here. And so we were talking earlier, like, what is an action movie? So we have the definition here. It's a genre in which the protagonist or protagonists are thrust into a series of events that typically include violence, extending fighting, physical feats, and frantic chases. In this list, though, beware, in my tiers, I've left out Saving Private Ryan, which was tough. I don't know why I left it out, because I think it has some of the most thrilling action scenes. Mm-hmm. But I going through all the best of lists, I noticed that it was never brought up. I also left out Jurassic Park.
Yeah, that's more of a horror adventure film, in my opinion.
Now, if somebody wanted to yell at me and say those are action films, I'd be like, sure.
I think they have the elements of action in them, but it's not based around that.
Yeah.
Those are based around the thrill and the scares.
And if you want to call me out for it, that's fine. But, like, you watch these movies like Jurassic Park, it's just these animals attacking. It's like a creature feature.
Yeah.
But creature features feature action, but it's not exclusively in the action genre. So
Jurassic Park is as much of an action movie as Titanic is.
Yeah.
I mean...
Oh, yeah, you're right. I guess I also wanted to pick movies that just are in... I have a couple exceptions, but are just action. So Terminator 2 is a science fiction movie, but it's an action movie. Mm-hmm. Right?
I would agree.
Aliens, that's an action movie.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But so when you look at Terminator 2, you can't just go, oh, that's a science fiction movie with action. It's an action movie.
It's an action movie before science fiction.
Yeah.
Action sci-fi.
So, listen, I could never get this right.
There's no right or wrong here, except we are going to be right.
Yeah,
in our definitions.
So I want you to know where we're starting. And I also really picked action movies that kind of had the action on the ground. I left out Independence Day. I wanted movies that some people fly jets in this movie, but it's not all on the ground. But it's mostly gunfights, fist fights, car chases. It's not like blowing up cities. Does that make sense? Like, on the ground.
It does. I might have an issue with that, but we'll continue.
All right, so I'm going to start with tier 1. All right, so what I did was I developed 5 tiers, and each tier has 5 movies. Now, if you look through a list of 1990s action movies, you will say, I love that one, I love that one, I love that one, I love that. Like, it'll be 24 hours. You'll be sitting there going. So, before we wanted to get into it, though, I wanted to put some of my favorites. So, 13th Warrior, which you can listen to our episode about that. I love that movie. I didn't put it in one of the tiers. It was directed by Tiernan, John McTiernan.
Yep.
Hey. Universal Soldier, Ricky O. Ricky O is out of its mind. The Rocketeer, I adore. The Last Boy Scout. I love the script. I love the Shane Black dialogue. And then Escape from LA, which doesn't get enough love because in that movie, Kurt Russell rides motorcycles, plays basketball, hang glides, gets in a submarine.
The movie's so ridiculous.
It's
so over the top.
Kurt
I
Russell
enjoy it.
And Bruce Campbell are on the screen together. Nothing gets better. Those are my ones I wanted to say that I love before, and they're not in my tiers. So we're going to start with tier 1. You ready for this?
Yep, let's do it.
All right, so you can't have this list without Terminator 2 Judgment Day. James Cameron, just the chases, in LA, the final battle scenes, just the T-1000, what a great villain. It's urgent. Yep. Once this movie gets going, it doesn't stop.
It doesn't stop. It's just it's a runaway train at that point.
And that's what I think makes for some of the greatest action films. Like The Raid is one of my favorite action movies because once the action kicks off, there's no stopping. Zero. Mad Max Fury Road, no stopping. So that's why so I think if 10,000 people got in a room, 9,932 would put T2 into tier 1.
And those other 68 people are probably dumb.
Yeah. Or they're going...
There's something mentally wrong at that point.
Maybe they hadn't seen it in 15 years, or they're going with their hearts. Does that make sense? Like, they're saying, I haven't seen it, or maybe I'm going... Obviously, there's no right or wrong, but this movie will be included in tier 1.
T2's got it all, man. It's got the VFX, the special effects. It's got the star power of Schwarzenegger.
Yep, budget.
Huge. It's got the big budget.
Sarah Connor. James Cameron excels at making action films that are marketable, very marketable, because I love the strong women in there. I love how he does that, and I think that's why it stands up. Now, the next one is The Matrix, directed by the Wachowskis. So, this really messed me up, because there's 2 movies I wanted in tier 1, but I had to pick one. I'll get into it later. But so The Matrix. I mean, this movie, I would definitely say it's wholly original, but it also hijacked a lot of Hong Kong.
Yeah, it did. So
a movie that'll be in this list later, Fists of Legend, which I think has the greatest fight scenes you'll ever see in the 90s. The choreographer, Yuen Wu Ping, they hired him for The Matrix. And when you watch the Matrix fight scenes with the wire work, take that out. But the fight scenes, it's exactly like Fist of Legend. So I think they hired everyone they loved and brought them in and did brilliant work.
I think part of what makes the Matrix so popular still today, and the fact that they're now making a 4th movie, it's being, greenlit 16 years after the last one, is that it still resonates today. As in, like, the technology behind the movie, like, it's still some of that stuff's still being used today.
Yeah.
I mean, it's,
Bullet
further
time.
with the green screen, they've got new things to it, but, like, that type of camera work and movement has been so influential, in the last 20 years of action filmmaking. But then actually, like, on a story level, too.
Red pill, take the red pill.
Red pill, blue
What's your
pill
reality?
stuff.
We're online now.
Yeah, the virtual reality stuff, like, we're not quite to where they are in the Matrix, but it's like, that's where people want to be. They want to live in this virtual world, and that's what this movie takes place in.
And someone would rather be in the virtual world than in the reality. So I mean, you're right. This really resonates as. I mean, it's great. Like, they shot this in Australia. I just read a book called Best Year Ever. It's about 1999, written by Brian Raftery. Joel Silver championed this movie. Like, this movie wouldn't have been. It went over budget. It went over time. But Joel Silver was just like, we're doing it. We're doing it. We're doing it. And credit to the Wachowskis and Keanu Reeves and Carrie-Anne Moss and Lawrence Fishburne. They trained for months. But this movie is much like it's like the Jurassic Park of the 90s, where people say, that looks better than action movies nowadays, right? Like, Jurassic Park CGI, I mean, a lot of the aspect ratio, like, a great video just came out about why it looks better, and they talk about the aspect ratio and all of that. So, right now we have The Matrix and Terminator 2. 3, I think you have to have this movie on the list, and that's Hard Boiled. 1992, John Woo. He had directed The Killer and Bullet in the Head prior to this. But I just